Great. So there we go. So Sophie, you and I were just saying that it feels like quite an interesting timing to be having this conversation, considering there's the Channel 4 Davina McCall program
Mm.
about to air tonight at 9. It feels like I know it's like it's Mental Health Awareness Week, and it's also Endometriosis Day,
Ah,
which I think is, but it feels there's been so much sort of around, about menopause, about how important it is that we have the right support, the right education, and to the conversation that we just had, layering on of different complementary therapies,
mm,
as well as HRT, if that feels like the right route for somebody, but that it's this balance of lots of different routes that feels most useful. So I'm
yeah,
really delighted that you could be here and
I'm happy to
share
be here.
this.
A lovely
And
feel group, really lovely feel.
oh, and obviously the last time we tried to do this, we had complete technological mayhem.
We did soldier on for quite a bit though. Did try really hard.
I think we were a lesson in resilience.
Yeah.
So, Sophie, you are the proud parent of 2 books now.
Three.
3 books.
I have them strategically placed behind my head here.
Brilliant. Tell
I've got
show us.
one that's for birth, so that's for early motherhood, so the first year, and this one is the menopause one.
Brilliant.
So, and they're all really practical. I'm not someone who sits meditating all day, every day. I have a busy family. I have a hectic life. I run my own business. And so my books kind of reflect that a little bit, in that they're really quick, practical tools that you can fit into your life, which I think is really important. And I just think a little bit every day can make a massive difference. So, and I really think tailored techniques really work as well. So that's why there are so many techniques and exercises, is that I kind of tweak them and tailor them for different scenarios and things.
Brilliant. So that sounds,
All about practicality.
which is, I think, so a phrase that I quite often use is practical compassion. This idea of how we can really look after ourselves, but in a very, practical, hands-on way.
Yeah.
And yes, I was going to sort of see whether there's at some point we could even have a little practice of something when we're all together. I've got somebody desperately trying to get hold of me as we're talking. I don't know if you can hear the beeps coming in.
Yeah.
So before we kind of dive into all of that, I just wanted to get some of your kind of story about how you actually came to hypnosis yourself, and what was it about it that drew you?
Well, for those who haven't had hypnosis before, I would never ever have gone to a hypnotherapist. It wasn't on my radar at all. And um, you know, I suppose I still had all those kind of images in my head of what I thought it was. I didn't, and the idea that I could apply it to birth or to motherhood or anything like that was just so far out of my thinking. And then I used hypnobirthing for my second son's birth, and it was just because I was watching Richard and Judy. No, I wasn't watching Richard and Judy. My mother was, and she rang me up and she said, "Switch," if that people can remember Richard and Judy. And she said, "Switch Richard and Judy on, because you're really going to like what they're talking about." And so I switched it on, and they were talking about pain-free birth. Now I've come a long way, and my practice is quite different from that. It's much broader. But I was like, oh, I'll have some of that. Who wouldn't? I mean, honestly, that's up on offer. Who wouldn't? So I bought some CDs, and I played them every night. I kind of read the book. I couldn't get on a course or anything. But hardly anyone was doing hypnobirthing at that time. And when I had my second son, I had him, he was really early. And I kind of, the me before I did hypnosis when my water's broken in the middle of the night, would have been, quick, everyone wake up, it's an emergency. And it would have been a great big drama, and I've been running around and sort of lights on. And instead I kind of woke up and thought, oh, my water's broken. Oh, everything feels fine. Let everyone sleep. And I was totally chilled out about it. And I went on being totally chilled out about the birth. I wasn't concerned or anxious or anything. And as I was having contractions, I was on a monitor, and the midwives were like saying the machine's broken because she's not reacting to the contractions like she should be. And after that birth, my husband was just blown away, and he's a scientist. He's got a PhD in biochemistry, and he was like, that's amazing. Why don't you go and just train in it and find out a bit more? So I did the training course to be a hypnotherapist, become a hypnotherapist, with no intention of practicing. It was just, I was curious. And that course just changed my life. Oh my God, it makes me feel tearful because it was amazing. The understanding how your mind works and how much more in control I felt about my emotions, how I felt, how that impacted on my physical well-being. And then I went on a silent retreat with a 2 and a 3-year-old, kind of baptism of fire, with someone called Thich Nhat Hanh, if anyone does Buddhism or follows anything like that. So it's an amazing experience, and it just, that as well. And I started applying those tools to my parenting and to myself as well. It's more about, like you say, it was quite, I call it self-fully instead of selflessly. It was about me, not about the children, because I knew if I looked after myself, it would affect my children. And then when I started going through peri-menopause, and I had terrible hair loss early on, really awful hair loss. I was wearing wigs and everything. But everyone said to me, gosh, you're so resilient. You're so like, aren't you upset about it? Aren't you this? And I was like, well, of course, but it just is what it is. And I can either get stressed about it, or I can change my attitude and perception. So I would do things like call my wigs my hairy hats and things like that, and just change what I thought about it. And so I found that these tools for myself and the women that I was working with in clinic, it just worked so well, just like birth, because it is a transitional time, isn't it, Henny? And it's and I said to someone recently, I don't know who it was, it's like at those points, adolescence, birth, motherhood, menopause, it's like you become more vulnerable and fragile in some ways, but it's like a part of you opens up and says, come on in, come and learn a bit more about yourself, come and see what you're really capable of, and I think you have to have the tools to be able to do that, and to see that that is an opportunity for deeper reflection and integration of self as well. And so the tools I have are about going into that and feeling robust enough to do that and to have that experience.
I love that, Sophie. Thank you. And I felt that upwell of emotion as you said that. You can really, really hear in your voice how powerful this work is, that it feels like it's part of you. And often when I talk about menopause, I'll describe it as being a thin place. Not in the sense, obviously, it's an interesting word, considering often we put on weight during menopause, or perimenopause, but this sense that it's the barriers between us and the world, but also between us and our inner world, they become thinner. And in Celtic mythology, they talk about the thin places in geographical terms, where we're closer to God, spirit, the universe, whatever your sort of thing is, nature. And so just listening to you there, that sense of the thinning and therefore the vulnerability, which can be really frightening, but also that portal that can open up inside us and introduce us or invite us to meet ourselves, to go in.
It's that liminal space, isn't it? It's like a and I think it's almost like we're gifted it. And I think from my experience with birth as well, when, often with birth, we say, when a woman's supported well during birth, she feels knowledgeable and confident, it enables her to go to that point that she didn't feel she could. And that when you get to that point, you discover something, you start to discover more of your power. It's like unlocking more of your power. And that's exactly the same with menopause. It's very, very similar.
So I'm also very mindful that obviously for so many women, myself included, when I went through my own menopause, it's a very, very challenging time, and it's and there's it can feel like we're that we don't know our own body, or we feel a bit disconnected from our body. We can feel like our mind is just doing God knows what, its own kind of crazy thing. And and so I think sometimes when we're right in the thick of it, it can feel almost impossible to connect with this idea that it can be a um, a powerful place of transition or a positive experience, as we move through it. So I'm really interested in hearing what's the most surprising thing that your clients experience when they work with you, or that you've noticed.
Like, it's interestingly, they don't tend to come to me for menopause, and this is how I work, and it's how I've really written the book, is about experiences, because everyone has very different experiences. In the book I have, are you Mrs. Unique or Mrs. Average? And we're all completely unique, and so it's learning about your own experience. And so the women that come to me are usually for sleep, because it's hypnotherapy, usually sleep, weight loss, confidence, anxiety, sudden onset phobias. Now that is surprisingly common. Women come in saying, I suddenly can't do this or can't do this. Or for example, I don't think I've used this one in the book. I had one woman who came in who suddenly couldn't go to the theatre. She loved the theatre, she loved going out, but she had enormous anxiety around it, and it was so sudden, and it came on quite unexpectedly, and so she would try and go, and she just couldn't do it, and it was really distressing, because it felt like a big part of who she was, she just couldn't do anymore. And so with hypnotherapy, we did some work around the feelings. So I do a lot of work about connecting with the feeling, where it is in your body, what color or shape it is. So I do lots of very visual imagery around that. And she made the connection that what she was feeling was connected to her father's funeral, where she was sat at the front and couldn't get out. She was stuck in the middle, had all these uncomfortable feelings and couldn't get out. And it had surfaced during menopause, even though it happened quite a lot earlier in life. And I've had countless stories like that. And it's as if, you it's very hard sometimes, these things coming up again, but perhaps when we're a little bit older and wiser, we have more capability to manage these things as well, with the right support. So that's something that can be really, hypnotherapy can work really quickly with. I mean, people, and there's another woman, I have used this one in the book, where she was on a cruise, and there was a storm at sea, and her husband closed the curtains, and from that moment onwards, she couldn't be in small places at all. She couldn't get in a car and be a passenger. She felt trapped, and she couldn't go anywhere. She was feeling trapped in her house. And it turned out that when she was very young, her father, to punish her, would put her in the cupboard under the stairs. And she loved her father dearly. He was a wonderful, wonderful father. But that had come up, and it came up in therapy. And it was just taking her to a place where she could feel upset about that, but also love her father at the same time. and not feel guilty about feeling. And it's like she carried that, and at this stage in her life, and the curtains closing in the cabin on the boat, and the slight nausea on the boat had just suddenly brought it up, just suddenly in that moment. And so I see quite a lot of that in menopause, and that can be absolutely life-changing for people, because not only are they processing a trauma that's unconsciously sat there, but they've discovered how powerful their mind is. And I always explain what's happening in the brain and what's going on, and I think it's really important to have that knowledge. And so everyone I work with, I tell them what's happening, how their brain is, has dealt with this, and how it's dealing with this, and what they can do to support their brain and their mind health and their well-being. And so, yeah, I think that for me always blows me away. And, they're always surprised when I say, maybe you could try this little visual. Do you get hot flushes? And they're like, yeah. And you say, do you want to try this visualization? And they're like, okay. And of course, that's one of the most effective things. 73% of people see an improvement in hot flushes with hypnosis, as with imagery and suggestion. So, yeah, I think the most profound for me is, getting someone from a place like that to a place where they feel really liberated at a deep level, on a really deep level.
And it sounds like, sort of listening to you as well, that so women are, potentially kind of noticing a particular symptom that they're really struggling with, and then coming to you, not really, maybe then understanding the breadth of sort of how you can support them as well. I know when I first started coaching, I ended up kind of calling myself like the menopause whisperer, because I realized like sort of 80% of the women that I was working with, there'd be some point in our like first or second session where there'd be this flag going up in my head, and I'd just be like, I am so sure that I'm seeing, or I'm seeing menopause, peri-menopause, in the room with me now. And I expect that's probably a sort of similar thing for you, that people coming to you and then going, okay, I know what's happening here.
And it's a lot of people, because with hypnotherapy, a lot of people come to a hypnotist when they're at with a final port of call. They're really at the end of their tether, because a lot of people will come to me through word of mouth, or because they're desperate. And sometimes I think, oh my gosh, I wish you had discovered hypnotherapy like 5, 6, even 10 years ago, because you can adjust lifetime habits and behaviors around food, exercise, self-care, all these sorts of things. And hypnotherapy can help you to amplify those practices and sort of change those. A mini goal setting with hypnosis, for example, is so good, because you can use imagery and suggestion and all sorts of things. And it just bypasses that part of your brain which says, oh, don't do that because of this and that. And you go, oh, and it just gets you past that part of your brain. And it's just feels amazing. Everyone's really surprised that it feels so good to have hypnotherapy. It's not like swinging watches or anything like that. It's just really relaxing. And the thing I did yesterday with the BMA, I just did a very simple 10-minute imagery exercise, and someone said, oh, I had this really bad pain and it's just gone. Is that normal? And I said, yeah, I work with people with chronic pain, and it can, you can hypnosis relaxation, you just feel very light, and you can feel quite detached from your body as well. But it just feels, some people feel a bit lighter, some people feel a bit heavier. It just feels like you're drifting in and out of a daydream, that kind of state just between being awake and asleep. It's just lovely. And I listen to one nearly every night before I go to sleep. Not mine, I would add, someone else's.
Well, I know when I have had it very successfully to stop smoking, and I've talked about this before on my own podcast, and it still shocks me to even think that I ever did smoke, because because it was so effective. And that uh, state of trust
Mm.
that you have with your therapist, and I think that's, I think with any therapeutic practice, it's so important that you have a, you know, you like the person that you're
Mm.
working with,
Mm.
or that's sort of supporting you. But that's, so that place of trust and the release into it, but also consciousness. And
Mm.
so, you know, you're completely aware, but you're just in that, as you say, that beautiful kind of floating place. It's a bit like, you know, where you can get to if you meditate. It
Mm.
can be a bit fleeting sometimes when you meditate, but it, you know, just being held in that space is a wonderful gift.
It is, and it is like, it feels very similar to meditation, but it's actually quite different, because rather than focusing on something or staying with your breath, um, or paying attention, I mean, with meditation and with mindfulness, it's all about observing a feeling or accepting a behavior or a habit, being curious about it. And with hypnosis, it's kind of, right, I've had enough of you, I'm getting rid of you. You know, you're just moving on from there. So it's quite different. The space feels very similar, but what you do in that space is very different.
Okay, so we had some questions come in,
Mm.
and one is actually from one of our lovely attendees joining us today. How does hypnosis help with moods, Sophie?
Right. Well, because obviously moods can be up and down a lot. So first is reducing stress in your life. So doing a daily hypnosis track or meditation, just to let go of things that are just there under the surface, bubbling away, but things that are worrying you or making you anxious. So things like thinking about, I don't know whether you've heard of a stress bucket. So, you know, it's just like emptying your stress bucket every day. That's really, really important. So that's kind of maintenance, and that will really help. The second thing is we do a lot of suggestion therapy in hypnosis about moods and about balance. So lots of words that speak to your unconscious about being able to balance moods, but also being able to respond quickly if you feel yourself becoming overwhelmed. So I embed unconscious tools, unconscious suggestion, for example. So unconscious is aware of something's happening, to instantly click into a relaxing breath. Or, you know, a lot of the work I do is conditioning as well. So, for example, in my book, I've got a 3-2-1, relax, relax, relax. And I would encourage anyone who came to see me to practice that in a place where you feel very calm, with relaxing music on in the background. So you associate 3-2-1, relax, 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 with feeling calm. So whenever you feel things escalating or you feel yourself tipping out of balance, you can just ground yourself. There's a grounding technique as well. And just say 3-2-1, relax, relax, relax. And because you've conditioned that, your body responds quickly with the suggestion, right, this is what I'm going to do now. And as your body relaxes, what you're doing is you're activating your soothing system in your body. So your soothing system counteracts any adrenaline, cortisol, all those stress hormones. And if you think about, you know, like a seesaw effect. So the more stress you have, the less oxytocin and your feel-good hormones you have. But the more of those feel-good hormones and oxytocin you have, the less stress you have. And so in those moments, it's about knowing what to do. And it's very hard when you're in those moments. I mean, I have it as well. I'm not like absolutely level-headed and calm all the time. I have to work at it as well sometimes. And, you know, I shout at my kids sometimes as well. Everyone thinks I'm this kind of, but I'm not. But I use these tools. If I feel myself kind of escalating and things getting too much, I just ground myself. I use my 3-2-1, relax, relax, relax. and I listen to my tracks every night before I go to bed. So if I'm in this state where I'm in a moment where my moods are really up here, I make extra effort to listen to the tracks, to do the exercises. And when they're down here, I don't stop. I still use them, I condition them. And so hypnosis isn't a magic wand. It isn't you come and see me and I say, oh, your moods are gone. I wish I could do that. But what I can do is embed suggestions in your unconscious so that you think about these things when you need them, but also to give you the tools to embed them yourself. And I think that's the important thing about hypnosis, is it empowers you to make those changes, and that in itself can help with your moods when you feel more in control and more connected with what's happening. And sometimes with things like that, I liken them to a contraction. If you've had children, for example, and sometimes it's about jumping in on it and thinking, right, what's going on now? What's happening now? Where is this in my body? Let's connect with my breath right now. So it's thinking and being curious about it as it's happening. But that takes some practice as well. But once you learn these tools and once you embed them, they are a bit like magic. They really do work. I am not your Zen person. I am not that person, not really deep down. That's not me. So I really put these, that's why I love them so much, because they make such a difference to my moods. It helps regulate, because it works with your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that helps regulate what's happening in your body and emotions and feelings. So that's really what I would do with someone. And then you bring in other imagery. So someone I was working with the other week, we were working on this, and I said to her, so when you are clear-headed, when you're in that place, when you feel like everything's going well and everything's flowing and you're feeling grounded, describe that feeling to me. And then in the end, she said, it's like a glacier mint. And I said, well, go out and buy yourself some glacier mints. And every time you're feeling like that, have a glacier mint, because it will remind you of what it feels to feel that like crisp, clear-headedness. So when you're working with someone individually, you can weave in little triggers like that to help you as well. So it's quite individualized in how you work with it.
And I think one of my reflections as I listen to you is about the importance of just as with many of the practices that I might share with my clients that come from a sort of coaching or a kind of mindfulness perspective, it's the ongoing practice that enables you to be able to use the tool in the moment when you need the first aid. And just reflecting as well on something else you said there about when we're in the peaks and troughs, if we're in a really stressed state, it can be really easy to abandon ourselves and go fully into the, I'm just going to feel like, crap, and treat myself like that as well. And equally, when we're in the sort of the very kind of calm and everything's great, then we can also abandon all the kind of self-care practices then as well, because it's like, oh, I'm doing all right, I don't need them. So it is so important to be using them all the way through the peaks and troughs.
And when you're in the good, when you're kind of in that flow and when you're feeling good, that's the time to do the exercises, the practical stuff, like, okay, when I'm feeling like that, what works for me? Writing it down and stuff. And, in one of my other books, I might have it in this one, I encourage people to write down things that make them feel good. So it might be dancing in your kitchen, it might be having a cup of tea, going for a walk, just writing down 10 things that are free, and putting them in the jar when you're on that kind of nice flow time. And then when you're feeling like everything's unraveling a bit, then you get your jar and you pick something out. So that's a lovely little exercise to do. And you can fill it up with as many things as you like. And it's just a reminder in the fog of everything, right, I'm going to do this one thing now. I'm just going to do this. And so use those times when you're like here to here, whether you do it whichever way around, to reinforce when you are going to be spiraling and things, because that is menopause. We have those ups and downs, and you know, that's a normal part of menopause, and I think having the tools to deal with it can make a massive difference.
And that word, that's a normal part of menopause, you know. I think that's important as well, is sort of, is recognizing that this is just part of what is, but that there are tools that we can use. And there were a couple of other questions that came in, which I think are connected and
Mm.
to a degree. One was around how can it help with weight loss
Mm.
during menopause, and then actually, yeah, I'll separate the two questions. Let's go with that one. How it can help with weight loss.
Well, firstly, the chapter in my book on this is called Letting Go of Weight and Loving Wellbeing.
Love.
And the reason I say that, and with hypnosis, we don't talk about weight loss, because if you lose something, what do you want to do? You want to find it. So, and that's the unconscious speaks a very, in the language you're in, is it's very literal, the unconscious, very, very literal. And so I work with weight, I say way less, letting go of weight, use that sort of language. But it is complex, I think, with menopause, and a lot of hypnotherapists don't really take menopause into account when they're working with weight, with letting go of weight. And so weight is connected with, obviously, cortisol and stress and anxiety. And if we're not sleeping as well, that can affect eating, because we produce something called ghrelin, which makes us want to eat comfort foods, energy rich foods, if we're not sleeping. And so for me, it's lots of different things. First of all, it's about getting on top of sleep and rest. And if you're having trouble sleeping, I've got other strategies around that, understanding what's going on in the brain and the importance of rest. So we do a lot around that. I look at unconscious patterns in the behavior and around food in the past, so emotional triggers and things like that. I look at just simple exercises to encourage intuitive eating, so unconscious suggestion to be, because we all know what we need to do. I can't, there's no point in someone coming in and me saying, well, you've got to eat your 5 a day and you've got to do this and you've got to do, because everyone knows that. It's just what's stopping you doing that. And that's what I work with. So I have like big stop for size klaxons that come into your head, and when, and also lots of mindful eating, because that's really powerful with how we think about our bodies and eating. And there are some lovely little strategies around mindful eating that are shown to help with weight loss and things like that. But then I've got a chapter on on loving well-being and loving your body and having gratitude for your body, because it's our culture that defines how we should look during menopause, and it's that's not always how we should be. And so I've got some exercises in there which are about, one of them is taking a photograph of yourself, either fully dressed, in a bikini, or naked, whatever you feel most comfortable with, and printing it off and then labeling it and saying, this part of my body gave me this part of my body does this for me. And it might be my heart's, has beat every day of my life for me. It's kept me alive for so many years. And if you've breastfed children, I say, these breasts fed my children for X amount of time. This scar is when this happened and it healed beautifully. My body healed me. And so you can start to change how you view your body as well, and start having gratitude for your body. And that again has a really big knock-on effect in terms of weight loss as well. Because when you start to accept your body and really, really love your body, then it goes away.
There's from a very kind of personal perspective here, and also seeing with my own clients how weight is so often an emotional protective layer, in that thinning of menopause, when we feel so vulnerable, old stories rising and hormones raging, that actually our body can then hold on to weight in order to protect us. And I actually went back to the hypnotherapist that I had worked with, who I really respect and rate. And I sat down and I said, Juliet, I need you to hypnotize me into eating food that, that I should be eating, and not eating food that I shouldn't be eating. We had a session. And at the end of it, she said, I don't think it's about the choices you're making. And she was absolutely right. There was an awful lot more going on.
Yeah.
5 years later. But, it's interesting how we can land on something and also treat it as a judgment about ourselves as well. It's like, I need to fix it. And
I
that
need to fix it. It's
I need
that,
to fix it.
I need to fix it.
Which,
And it's about self-compassion as well. It's like usually the part of someone that is perceiving that weight gain, because it's just a part of someone, is feeling vulnerable and frightened, and anxious and perhaps unloved. And we use words in hypnotherapy like, are you feeling fulfilled or satisfied? Because that is often what food is doing. It's fulfilling. And so it's just reprogramming your unconscious to feel fulfilled in other ways or satisfied in other ways, to experience that fulfillment and satisfaction in a different and better way for that individual. And that's just reprogramming, because sometimes weight gain is about protection as well.
and that word compassion just seems to be kind of wrapping around so much of what you're talking about here. And this just brings us on to the last question, which was around, so Emma asked, how can hypnosis really help women with breaking unhealthy old patterns that no longer serve us? So I think this really resonates with that idea of kind of moving through menopause, seeing the stuff that we want to move on from, seeing what we want to move toward, but not necessarily knowing how to cross that divide between the two.
So when I see people, they've come to me for a particular thing that is troubling them. And so if it is a pattern of behavior or an particular anxiety or a phobia, it's the first thing I do is I connect with it through feeling, and then I get them to disassociate with it, and start to explore that feeling. And there's some really amazing techniques to do that. It's something called timeline that is just phenomenal. I use it a lot. I don't do regression hypnotherapy because of false memory syndrome, because people can come, people can create memories. So it's not a very useful form of hypnotherapy. Instead, timeline is excellent, because it's just, you ask someone to connect with a feeling, and then imagine they have a timeline running through them from their past to their future. And you're smiling like you know this one. And you just get them to, I get them to imagine that color like a spool of thread that's going back through their past, and they can hover above their timeline in this thread and follow it back to the first moment that a feeling came into. And it's really interesting what comes up. People don't think anything's going to come up, and then suddenly it's there. And then you ask them to go into that memory as an adult and watch it like a diorama, or watch that experience, and then tell that child in that experience what they know as an adult, what they can bring to that experience as an adult. And honestly, it's the most amazing thing. And then you just say, so if that were your child, what would you say to them? And they go even deeper at that point. And then, you do a few other things, and you take what they've learned into the future as well, and do lots of little bits and pieces. But it's amazing. It clears so much so quickly. It's really effective technique. And there are other techniques, like it's got something called the cinema script, or 3-step rewind. It's got different names, and that's good for processing past trauma, which often can lead to blocks and things like that. I've got a simple one in the book where I get you to imagine that there's a big brick wall that is made, every brick is, things that have created that fear or that that block, and that you have a big piece of, you have a detonator and you put it near the wall and you go and you detonate the wall and then you can walk through. Just little bits of imagery like that. But you can go quite deeply by identifying a feeling and giving it a color, because it disassociates, but it works with your unconscious, so your critical mind doesn't have to go through that experience. It's really effective. So that's particularly good. And then a lot about changing habits and behaviors is about creating new ones. Everything we do is learned, and so it really is, you know, I love mini goals and things, so I will set someone, I'll create a sort of forward going timeline with little mini goals, and I get the people to imagine them. So for example, going for a run under hypnosis, you get them, first of all, you'd anchor a feeling of, yeah, I've done it, I feel really good. And then you anchor that feeling to putting on your shoes, putting on your running kit, opening the front door, going out. So every point on that journey, you feel that sense of, yeah, this is going to feel great, or it feels great. And that's just about habit. The more you do it, you can embed it and seed it in hypnosis, but then you give someone the tool to take that away. Tanya said, do you need to do this in person? No, it's all in my book. I really want people to have these tools and not have to go to a hypnotherapist, because a lot of them are, you know, you can deepen a lot of the practices and you can amplify them with hypnosis and accelerate them with hypnosis. That's, you know, but honestly, if you're willing to learn about it and how it works and just do a little bit every day, you know, sometimes it's just knowing what to do and how to change it, and knowing that it's simpler than you realize.
You know, I think that's certainly one of my own reflections, and just listening to you there, and also listening to you describe some of these techniques. They're very accessible. Just saying goodbye to Emma. They're very, very accessible. Thank you for joining us, darling. Very accessible practices, and they are, there's a simplicity to the process as well. It feels like that, and so often, you know, it's like, ooh, hypnotherapy. I don't know, it's like some dark art, you know, some magical mystical thing. And actually, what we're talking about here, that there's huge crossover. That's my other reflection as I listen to you. And I think that's the other thing here as well around, you know, between different therapeutic practices, you know, it's no longer feels as though, well, there's a sharp line. There's a sharp line even between like counseling and hypnotherapy, or counseling, hypnotherapy and coaching, or, you know, using different methodologies.
Yeah.
This is all really valuable knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to be able to layer it in. And
Yeah, I mean, I have to be very careful. I'm not a counsellor, so yes, I do use a lot of cognitive behavioural work. I'm really solutions focused, and I like people to reflect and explore. But I'm not a counsellor, and I have to be very clear about that when I'm working with people. So I'm very careful, and if I think something's veering into counselling, I will refer to a counsellor. And I do work quite closely with some counsellors. I get referrals, you know, especially if someone's having counselling, long-term counselling, and they come to a block and they just can't get past that block, I'll get a referral because I can help them get through that block. So I think the hypnotherapy and the counselling work really well together. And I would say that having two different people doing those types of work is quite beneficial as well. I think a hypnotherapist, and you can do hypnotherapy and counselling with one person, but I do think that having someone different to work on both those skills and come together is somehow richer.
yeah, I can appreciate that, actually, because I think again it sort of comes back to that layering, and you will, as the client, you'll take different things from the two different experiences and different approaches.
So
Well, just sort of one last question, I suppose, is Where do people turn next? I mean, obviously your book, and if people want to work with you directly,
Yeah,
you've
I've got a website, and it's got an automated booking system and everything. I tend to do a 90-minute session to start with. And sometimes I like the sessions to be really practical. So I like someone to come in and I like to set them up with something. And I will often give them an MP3 to go away with as well, and some tools. But I think I've packed loads into the book, and the book has got 10 downloads with it. So, and you can get the downloads for free. So you don't even have to buy the book. You can just have a go. And, you know, this has worked really well with my other books. I love the fact that, you know, anyone can access them. You know, you can go to the library and get the book and get the download. So it can be, you know, and if you know, it's also an audiobook. So if you haven't used Audible before, you can get the audiobook for free on a credit. So, you know, I really love the fact that it is so accessible. And I would always say to someone, start by reading the book, listen to the MP3s, just get a feel for what it is and what you want to work on, where you want to put that energy and that time, because there will be something in the book or something you come across and think, yeah, that's what I want to do the hypnotherapy with. So I prefer people to come to me like that rather than say, sort my menopause out. I want to know what part of menopause that is troubling them and why, and really get into that. Okay. So really, because otherwise I think, you know, it's a lot of time and money to kind of go around the houses, you know, and you can pinpoint things really quickly. But it's kind of, I quite like to empower people to read the book and think about what matters to them, what they really want from this, how they want the book to expand for them, and then come and see me.
Wonderful, wonderful. That sounds, and I love that generosity of spirit that came through as you were talking there. The you know,
I'm always told, Sophie, you're a terrible business.
Oh, I don't know. I think it's a good thing. You know, this is about my personal purpose, which arrived in my head one day, is gather love and knowledge and share. So
yeah,
I think it sounds pretty similar to that. So
yeah, and I think, yeah.
And I just wondered whether anyone's got any other questions just before we close. If there's anything else that you'd really like to ask Sophie, and if not, just to say thank you so much. That was wonderful, and so many practical components to it as well. Really appreciated that. And yes, I will share your details and let people know how they can buy the book. And also, I saw that you were encouraging people, once they have read the book, to put a review.
Oh yeah, it's all, you know, I hate asking. I really hate asking. And someone said to me, Sophie, it's not about you, it's about the women. You know, if you want your message to get out there and you want people to hear it, you've got to ask for these things, because yeah, Amazon is just evil beast. And you have to leave, I think you have to get 50 reviews in the first few weeks to get up on lists and things. And you know, I'm not a big Instagrammer. I'm not like, you know, Maisie Hill, Emma Bardwell and people like that. I just quietly go about and do my thing. And publishing houses do want influencers now. I'm very lucky to have the deal I have, because now they'll only take people with massive Instagram followings.
I was going to say, I must be such a poor Instagrammer because I don't know either of those people that you just mentioned.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, they literally put something out and their book goes into the top 100 in Amazon. It's like they're just, it's amazing. Yeah. So people like me really do need kind of reviews and things like that to kind of get us up there. And but yeah, I hate asking.
Okay, well we'll do a very polite request as part of it.
I really appreciate that, Penny. You can do it for me.
Well, because the thing is, so I'm rubbish at asking people about my own book, so I barely mention
You've written
it.
a book?
Yes, I've written a book. You can interview me another time about that.
I will.
It's
I
quite
will.
well, actually. So wonderful. Thank you so much. It was just a real joy to be like, I see Sue giggling in the background. So it's just, yeah, really, really lovely to spend some time with you and appreciate you being here. And I don't know whether others are going to go off and now watch Davina McCall and see what she has to say about menopause. Yes, the thumbs up there. So
it's all about integrative care as well. We were
all
talking
about integrative.
Keep that in your head when you're watching this documentary. You know, HRT is great, but it's not a panacea, and it's all about integrative work,
layering it on.
Yeah.
All right, brilliant. I'm going to stop recording now.
Thank you for joining us and for staying for so long.
Thanks, Sophie.
That was wonderful.
All right.